Welcome to the what is with me today?
Don't know, mate.
Stop, reset. Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast. That's what I'm saying, isn't it?
Yeah, you've only said it 24 times.
Seriously. Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and a Bible. This is day 24. Today we're going to be covering Exodus 19, 20, and 21.
In Exodus 19, Moses meets God and gets the 10 commandments. In Exodus 20, God speaks the 10 commandments to Israel. And in Exodus 21, God speaks to Moses about more of his laws. All right, I will kickstart off today, and I won't say marvelous, even though I did enjoy that from yesterday. So lots to get through, lots of confusion for me in Exodus, I'll confess, because when Moses goes up to the mountain, I don't know when he comes back down and what he's learned and what he hasn't learned, and when the idols are being worshipped and when they're not, and so let's try and straighten that out for me, if nothing else, over the next few days.
Shout out to Moses' cardio and his legs. The boy was 8 years old when he started this, and he's just rocking up and down Mount Sinai. I don't know whether Mount Sinai is like an actual, it must be a mountain these days as well, but can't be an easy trek.
No, right. That's the original Stairmaster right there. He must have had fantastic hamstrings. Anyway, bit weird. So I love the glorious imagery in Exodus 19. We'll segue from Moses's glorious hamstrings to the glorious imagery of God. He says, God says, you yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Exodus 19:4. I particularly like the image because I know that eagles and other birds protect their young by covering their young with their wings, their wingspan. And I just think that that's a great image of Jesus. He ultimately, he covers us and cloaks us with his righteousness. And I just love that.
It's also eagles that kick their young out of the nest before they can fly, but then they swoop under them and catch them. And so they have to use their wings to catch their young as well. Then they drop them back in the nest. And so it's just a way of eventually they learn to fly, but it's through being booted out and free falling for a little while.
I did not know that. And for a minute, I thought you're just going to destroy the metaphor, just like, oh yeah, they just boot their young out and sometimes the young die. It's like, oh, that sort of undercuts, but no, that's beautiful, man. I did not know that.
David Attenborough, mate, you do.
I did. I was just thinking I need to get some Attenborough back in my life. It's been a little while. So
but yes, that metaphor, the way he carries you on eagle's wings, that's what that's all about. It's great imagery there. What I was curious about here in Exodus 19 is the words that they're using here, the terminology of it being like thunder and lightning and everything like that sounds a lot like a volcano eruption. And I do wonder whether, not in this example, but whether there are certain times in the Bible where our knowledge in the 21st century is just so much better that they see these kind of things and like, it must be God. It's like, no, that's actually a volcanic eruption. That's caused, or that's an earthquake. That's caused by tectonic plates rubbing against each other. They probably didn't know about tectonic plates. And how much was attributed to God that was actually just sort of natural phenomena, which, let's be honest, is attributed to God. So maybe they are more on the ball than we are.
Yeah, no, I think that you're spot on, man. I was going to say, so Exodus 19:16, the thunder and lightning, the thick cloud, the loud trumpet blast, everyone in the camp trembles. Volcano or not, like it's that awesome power of God. And who's to say that God's very presence didn't cause a little volcanic eruption right there on Mount Sinai while Moses was working on his fabulous hamstrings and calves,
Apparently it is a 2,285 meter moderately high mountain, is what Google tells me.
Easy then.
High enough if you're climbing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're climbing up and down it with big tablets with rules on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, by the way, let's segue into the 10 Commandments here for a second, because thank goodness for Jesus, because the 10 Commandments, sure, theoretically, you might be able to do that. But by the time they start adding these other laws, and we'll touch more on the laws in like Exodus 21, probably tomorrow. But man alive, do we need Jesus?
Oh, amen to that. And what I love about the Ten Commandments is they give us the sort of beginning framework, and then Jesus obviously fulfills that as well and says, have you ever committed adultery? No. But have you ever looked at a woman with lust?
True.
Yes. Well, you've committed adultery in your heart. So he sort of doubles down and actually shows the true intent of the Ten Commandments. And we could
Yes.
barely keep the Ten Commandments, like you said. So
Yeah.
then never to look at a woman with lust, never to have like angry thoughts towards the
Yeah.
neighbor or whatever.
And you know what?
No chance.
So much of the Ten Commandments were just kind of based on don't be selfish when you break it down. I was listening to this in another podcast that I've mentioned before, the Bible study podcast, I think it's called, by Chris Christensen. And he kind
Great
of
name
on this, right? Where actually so many of them is like, when you look at it, it's like, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't give false testimony about other people, don't covet your neighbor's house. All these things are because you want something that someone else has. Even when it's talking about have no other God, or don't have idols, we can be the other idol. We can be another God. We can worship ourselves so highly above other things that actually it puts ourselves above God. And so much of this stuff that's in here is just simply don't be selfish, put other people first, love the Lord your God. Like, that's the first thing, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Have no other gods before me. And I mean, a lot of this, I think, is because at this stage, the Israelites didn't really have their own identity. Again, this was sort of from the other podcast, where they're just sort of ex-Egyptian slaves at this stage. So some of these laws with the Ten Commandments and then moving forward was just to establish their own identity as a people, as
100%.
and so I think that makes a lot of sense as to why we start seeing this and why we see it in such detail as well.
Absolutely. And you're just to build on that idea of them creating their own identity. So we might touch on this more tomorrow, in fairness, when we get into the laws and so on a bit more, but they are forming their own legal identity through this, and this is God inspired. And there's a great book called Is God a Moral Monster by Paul Copan. Fantastic read, even better audio book in my opinion. I would highly recommend it to anyone. And he talks about the way that the laws were set up in Babylon, for example, and how much harsher they were than these laws that are God-given laws. So this was revolutionary stuff, and it was at the same time, as you say, building the identity of the Israelites. So just fascinating, man. I did have an interesting thought on Exodus 21, way above our pay grade. I'm just going to say that immediately, but one of the Ten Commandments, obviously, thou shalt not murder. If anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death. And I just thought it was interesting because that's exactly what Moses did to an Egyptian a few chapters back. He knew that he was murdering the Egyptian. He did it anyway. And I just thought that was really, I'd love your thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's massive. I suppose he did this under Egyptian law, which probably one of the reasons why Pharaoh tried to chase him down and have him killed. But what I learned from this is God is fully aware of that and still choosing to use Moses. And I think for me, that just speaks volumes to don't let your past dictate your future. And I think I've mentioned that before in here. And I'm very thankful for that, because some of the crap that I've done in my life, you're probably the same way. We've known each other since we were 3. So we know a fair bit of each other's crap in the closet, whatever. And it's just such a blessing that God can use us despite those things, no matter what we've done in the past. Salvation and Jesus and his sacrifice on the cross just makes the way for the future with that. I briefly then as well just wanted, hopefully that sort of answers your question a little bit, mate.
It does. It absolutely does. I couldn't agree more.
Just wanted to touch briefly here at the end. We chatted right at the start about how I never used to work on Sundays and still don't. I was very aware, I've been kind of convicted in the last couple of weeks that actually I'm very aware that resting on the Sabbath isn't necessarily an option for everyone. There are some people that have to work 7 days a week to provide for their family. And I think we can easily make that a religious thing instead of it being God just wanting relationship with us. We need to make sure we spend time in our week to actually try and take time to rest and develop our relationship with him. So I just kind of wanted to slide that in there at the end.
Absolutely.
And obviously any questions, feel free to visit the Facebook page, 2 Brits and a Bible.
Or you can email us at 2britsbible@gmail.com.